A millionaire sees twin girls crying on the street, takes them to his house, but when he returns, he's shocked by what he finds. Rain poured mercilessly over New York City that night, the kind of rain that washes away both tears and hope. 15-year-old Emily Matthews stood on the edge of Brooklyn Bridge, her thin frame trembling against the bitter wind. Her blonde hair, darkened by rain, clung to her pale face as she stared into the churning waters below. "Emily, please, don't do this," Grace's desperate voice barely carried over the storm. Her twin sister stood a few feet behind, reaching out with shaking hands. "We promised to stay together, remember? Always together." Emily turned slightly, tears mixing with raindrops on her cheeks. "I can't take it anymore, Grace. The pain. It's too much. Mrs. Parker was right, I'm just a burden. To you, to everyone." "That's not true," Grace took a careful step forward, her heart pounding. "You're my sister, my best friend, my everything. Please, just take my hand." Lightning split the sky, illuminating the darkness for a split second. In that brief flash, Grace saw the deep bruises on Emily's arms. Mrs. Parker's latest discipline session had been particularly brutal. The orphanage director had singled Emily out, knowing she was the more vulnerable of the twins. A black Mercedes screeched to a halt on the bridge. Nathaniel Hayes stepped out, his expensive suit immediately soaked by the downpour. He had been driving home after another lonely evening at his office when he spotted the scene unfolding on the bridge. "Please help my sister," Grace cried out when she saw him, desperation in her voice. Nathaniel moved slowly toward Emily, his voice gentle yet firm. "Whatever you're running from, this isn't the answer. Trust me, I know about pain." Emily wavered, her feet inches from the edge. "You don't know anything about me." "You're right, I don't," Nathaniel admitted, taking another step closer. "But I know what it's like to feel so lost that the darkness seems like the only escape. I've stood where you're standing." A violent sob racked Emily's body. In that moment of vulnerability, her foot slipped on the wet ledge. Grace screamed as Emily began to fall backward toward the churning water below. Nathaniel lunged forward with lightning speed, catching Emily's wrist. Grace rushed forward, helping him pull her sister back to safety. The three of them collapsed onto the wet pavement, Emily wrapped tightly in Grace's arms as they both sobbed. What none of them knew then was that this moment would change all their lives forever. If this opening touched your heart and made you feel the deep bond between sisters, join our community of empathetic souls. Subscribe now to witness more powerful stories that remind us of love's ability to heal and transform lives. Together, we'll explore the extraordinary power of human connection. The story of Nathaniel Hayes began in the unforgiving streets of Brooklyn, where he learned early that life rarely offers second chances. Born to a teenage mother who abandoned him at St. Mary's Hospital, Nathaniel spent his first 8 years bouncing between foster homes, each one leaving deeper scars than the last. Unlike other children who found comfort in toys or games, young Nathaniel found solace in numbers. Mathematics became his escape, his mind constantly calculating probabilities and possibilities of a better future. At night, while other foster children cried themselves to sleep, he would solve complex equations by moonlight, dreaming of the day he could rewrite his own story. His life changed at age 8 when Margaret Wilson, a kind-hearted teacher at his school, noticed his exceptional mathematical abilities. She fought through bureaucratic red tape to adopt him, giving him not just a home but something he'd never had before: belief in himself. Under her nurturing care, Nathaniel flourished academically, graduating high school at 16 and earning a full scholarship to Harvard. College opened doors he never knew existed. While his classmates came from generations of wealth, Nathaniel worked 3 jobs to support himself and Margaret, who had been diagnosed with early-stage multiple sclerosis. His determination caught the attention of William Sterling, a visiting professor and Wall Street legend, who became his mentor and first investor in what would become Hayes Financial Group. By 30, Nathaniel had turned his initial investment into a billion-dollar empire. His innovative trading algorithms and uncanny ability to predict market trends made him a Wall Street wonderkind. But success came with a price. The longer hours he worked, the less time he spent with Margaret, his only family. Love found him unexpectedly in the form of Catherine Chen, a brilliant humanitarian lawyer who challenged his worldview and reminded him of the boy who once dreamed of making a difference. They married in a small ceremony, with Margaret beaming proudly from her wheelchair. For the first time, Nathaniel felt complete. Their son James was born a year later, bringing a joy Nathaniel never thought possible. But fate had other plans. On a rainy night much like the one where our story began, Catherine and James were driving home from visiting Margaret when a drunk driver ran a red light. Neither survived. The tragedy nearly destroyed him. Margaret's death from complications of her illness 6 months later left him entirely alone. The billion-dollar empire meant nothing. The penthouse overlooking Central Park became a gilded prison of memories. Nathaniel retreated into himself, his only human contact being with his assistant and the occasional board meeting. Years passed, and while his wealth grew, his heart remained frozen in time. He established the Catherine Hayes Foundation for orphan children, but couldn't bring himself to visit any of the facilities. The sight of children who had lost their parents reopened wounds that never truly healed. Now, at 45, Nathaniel Hayes was a man everyone knew but no one truly understood. His name appeared regularly in Forbes and Fortune. His company's success was studied in business schools worldwide. But few knew of the orphan boy who still lived within him. The same boy who recognized the pain in Emily's eyes that rainy night on the bridge. The media painted him as a cold, calculating businessman, the algorithm king of Wall Street. But those who looked closely might notice how he always paused near playgrounds during his morning walks, or how his donations to children's charities were always anonymous and substantial. In his quiet moments, alone in his vast penthouse, Nathaniel would often stand by the window, watching the city lights below, wondering if somewhere out there was a chance at healing, at finding family again. He kept Catherine's photo on his desk, James's stuffed bear in a glass case, and Margaret's old teaching awards in his study, reminders of a time when his wealth wasn't measured in dollars but in love. That rainy night on the bridge wasn't just about saving Emily, it was about saving himself, though he didn't know it yet. Sometimes the greatest acts of healing come not from trying to fix our own wounds, but from preventing others from experiencing the same pain. Emily and Grace Matthews were born 6 minutes apart on a cold December morning at St. Vincent's Hospital. Their mother, a waitress named Sarah Matthews, had barely enough strength to name them before complications from the birth took her life. Their father, Robert Matthews, a construction worker with a troubled past, tried his best to raise them alone, but his grief manifested in alcohol and unpredictable moods. The twins learned early to rely on each other. When their father's drinking got worse, Grace would hold Emily tight under their shared blanket, whispering stories about magical places where mothers never died and fathers always came home sober. Emily, though younger, developed a keen sense for their father's moods, warning Grace when his footsteps sounded particularly heavy on the stairs. Their childhood home was a small apartment in Queens, where cockroaches scuttled across peeling wallpaper and the heating worked only when it chose to. Grace excelled at school, her natural intelligence catching teachers' attention, while Emily struggled with dyslexia, but possessed an extraordinary talent for art. Their drawings covered the apartment walls, hiding water stains and cracks, their own way of creating beauty in darkness. Everything changed when they were 7. Their father, drunk and desperate for money, made a deal that would haunt the girls forever. Mrs. Victoria Parker, director of Hope's Haven Orphanage, offered him $20,000 to sign away his parental rights. He took the money and disappeared, leaving his daughters with nothing but each other and the crushing weight of abandonment. Hope's Haven was anything but hopeful. The Victorian mansion's impressive facade masked a world of calculated cruelty. Mrs. Parker, a master of appearances, presented a charitable face to donors while forcing the children to work like servants. Emily and Grace spent countless hours scrubbing floors, washing windows, and preparing meals for wealthy potential adopters who never chose them. The twins developed a system of survival. Grace, naturally protective, would take blame for any mistakes, shielding Emily from Mrs. Parker's notorious correction sessions. Emily, in turn, would slip extra food from the kitchen to Grace, knowing her sister often gave away her portions to younger children. They communicated through subtle gestures and whispered conversations late at night, developing a private language only they understood. Their greatest fear wasn't the work or even Mrs. Parker's punishments, it was separation. They overheard conversations about splitting up the Matthews girls to make them more adoptable. The thought of being torn apart terrified them more than any physical pain. They made a pact, sealed with their own blood pricked from their fingers. Nothing would ever separate them. As they grew older, the abuse became more sophisticated. Mrs. Parker, recognizing Grace's intelligence, would praise her publicly while belittling Emily, trying to create resentment between them. But her manipulation only strengthened their bond. Grace would secretly teach Emily after hours, helping her overcome her dyslexia, while Emily's art became their shared escape, her sketches telling stories of a future where they were free and together. The night before they met Nathaniel, Mrs. Parker had announced that a wealthy family was interested in adopting Grace alone. Emily, she declared with cruel satisfaction, would remain at Hope's Haven indefinitely. The news shattered something in Emily, leading to her desperate decision on Brooklyn Bridge. Their bond wasn't just sisterly love, it was a fortress built from shared pain, secret languages, and unshakable loyalty. Every scar on their bodies told a story of protection, every callus on their hands a testament to their shared burdens. They weren't just twins, they were two halves of a single soul, forged in adversity and strengthened by suffering. In a world that had shown them only cruelty, they created their own universe of love and protection. Their greatest strength was also their greatest vulnerability. They couldn't exist without each other. It was this profound connection that Nathaniel witnessed on the bridge, a love so deep it could either save or destroy them both. Hope's Haven Orphanage stood like a dark Victorian mansion on the outskirts of New York City, its imposing facade masking a web of corruption that Mrs. Victoria Parker had carefully woven over 2 decades. To the outside world, she was Victoria Parker, PhD in child psychology, philanthropist, and savior of abandoned children. Behind closed doors, she operated one of the most sophisticated child exploitation schemes in the state. The orphanage's financial records told a story of charitable donations and government grants, but the truth lay in secret ledgers hidden in Mrs. Parker's private office. Children weren't just orphans to be cared for, they were commodities to be traded. Wealthy couples seeking to adopt would find their applications mysteriously expedited after making substantial donations to the orphanage's renovation fund. Those who couldn't afford the unspoken price never made it past the initial screening. Mrs. Parker's background was built on carefully constructed lies. Her PhD was purchased from a diploma mill, her references were paid actors, and her charitable reputation was maintained through strategic donations to the right politicians and journalists. She had perfected the art of presentation, designer suits that were just expensive enough to suggest success without ostentation, a gentle smile that never quite reached her eyes, and a voice that could switch from warm concern to cold threat in an instant. The children at Hope's Haven were divided into categories based on their potential value. The display children were kept well-fed and clean, ready to be presented to potential donors or adopters. The others, like Emily and Grace, were treated as free labor, maintaining the mansion's immaculate appearance while living in cramped, cold dormitories in the basement. What made Mrs. Parker truly dangerous wasn't just her cruelty, it was her intelligence. She understood that visible bruises raised questions, so she specialized in psychological torture. She would praise one child while belittling another, create artificial scarcity to foster competition, and use the threat of separation to maintain control. Her favorite tactic was to cultivate hope, only to crush it systematically. The staff at Hope's Haven were carefully chosen for their willingness to look the other way. Those who showed too much compassion for the children were quickly dismissed with manufactured scandals that made them unemployable elsewhere. The few who threatened to expose the truth found themselves facing fraudulent criminal charges or worse. But Mrs. Parker's perfect system had one flaw: her own past. 20 years ago, she had been Sarah Hayes, a young woman who abandoned her newborn son at a hospital. That son had grown up to become Nathaniel Hayes, though she didn't know his current identity. But her hatred for the children in her care stemmed from her own guilt and self-loathing, twisted over years into a sadistic need for control. The irony of Hope's Haven was in its motto, carved in stone above the entrance where hope finds a home for the children inside. Hope was the most dangerous emotion of all. Mrs. Parker had turned it into a weapon, using it to break spirits and crush resistance. She understood that children who stopped hoping were easier to control. As Emily and Grace's story began to intersect with Nathaniel's, Mrs. Parker's carefully constructed world was about to face its greatest challenge. She had no way of knowing that the man who would eventually destroy her empire was the very child she had abandoned 2 decades ago. The escape from Hope's Haven was born of desperation and planned in whispers. After Mrs. Parker's announcement about separating the twins, Grace and Emily knew they had exactly 48 hours before the wealthy Anderson family would return to claim Grace alone. That night in their basement dormitory, they lay awake planning while other girls slept around them. "We have to leave tonight," Grace whispered, her fingers intertwined with Emily's under the thin blanket. "Mrs. Parker's dinner with the board is tomorrow." "The security will be distracted," Emily nodded, fighting back tears as she squeezed her sister's hand. They had been preparing for this possibility for months, squirreling away small amounts of food and a few dollars earned from secret errands for the kitchen staff. The twins waited until midnight when the night guard, Mr. Peterson, began his usual nap in front of the security monitors. They moved silently through the mansion's dark corridors, their feet bare to minimize noise. Years of cleaning these halls had taught them every creaky floorboard, every loose tile. At the kitchen door, they encountered their first obstacle. The new lock Mrs. Parker had installed after the last escape attempt was supposedly unpickable, but Grace, who had spent weeks studying it while doing dishes, had discovered its weakness. Using a hairpin and a broken knife she'd hidden in her sock, she worked on the lock while Emily kept watch, both their hearts pounding so loudly they were sure it would wake the whole house. The click of the lock opening seemed to echo through the silence. They froze, waiting for alarms or footsteps, but only the usual nighttime creaks of the old mansion responded. As they slipped through the door, Emily grabbed Grace's arm. "Wait," she whispered, darting back to grab a loaf of bread and some apples from the kitchen. They couldn't risk going hungry on the streets. The rain started just as they reached the garden wall. The old oak tree that had been their escape route during planning sessions now looked impossibly tall in the darkness. Grace went first, her stronger arms pulling her up branch by branch. Emily followed, fighting panic each time her foot slipped on the wet bark. At the top of the wall, they could see the street beyond freedom, so close they could taste it. But fate had other plans. A security light suddenly flooded the garden, and Mrs. Parker's voice cut through the night like a knife. Well, what do we have here?" She stood at the back door, still in her evening clothes, a cruel smile playing on her lips. Behind her, Mr. Peterson looked embarrassed and afraid. Emily froze, but Grace's voice came steady and clear. "Run." Now she pushed Emily toward the street side of the wall. They jumped, Emily landing awkwardly and crying out in pain. Grace helped her up as shouts and running footsteps approached from both directions. They ran through the rain, slicked streets, Emily limping but determined. Behind them, they could hear Mrs. Parker's voice getting fainter. "Find them." They couldn't have gone far. They ran until their lungs burned, taking random turns to lose any pursuers, the rain washing away their tracks. Hours passed as they huddled in doorways and under bridges, soaked and shivering. By dawn they had reached Brooklyn, far from Hope's Haven but with no real destination in mind. Emily's ankle was swollen, and both were exhausted beyond measure. They shared an apple, making it last as long as possible. That evening, as hope began to fade with the daylight, Emily's pain and despair overwhelmed her. Standing on Brooklyn Bridge, she made a decision that would change everything. Grace's desperate pleas merged with the sound of approaching car tires, and Nathaniel Hayes stepped into their story. In that moment of crisis, three lost souls converged. Nathaniel saw in the twins' eyes a reflection of his own childhood pain. Grace saw in his gentle approach someone who might actually care. And Emily, even as she stood on the bridge's edge, saw something she hadn't dared hope for in years, a possibility of salvation. The rain that had started during their escape was still falling as Nathaniel helped them into his car, turned up the heat, and drove them toward his penthouse. None of them spoke much during that ride, each lost in their own thoughts about how a single night could change so many lives. The drive to Nathaniel's penthouse was filled with a heavy silence, broken only by the gentle hum of the car's heater and Emily's occasional sniffles. Through the rearview mirror, he watched the twins huddled together in the back seat, their wet clothes dripping onto his Mercedes leather interior, a detail that would have bothered him yesterday, but now seemed utterly insignificant. As he pulled into his building's private garage, Nathaniel's mind raced with the implications of what he was doing. Taking in two underage runaways could be seen as kidnapping. His legal team would have a fit. The media would have a field day. Billionaire takes teenage girls home. He could already see the tabloid headlines. Mr. Hayes, Grace spoke softly as the elevator ascended to the penthouse. "We don't want to cause you trouble. Maybe you could just drop us at a shelter." Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled as they clutched Emily's. Nathaniel noticed how she positioned herself slightly in front of her sister, always protective. The penthouse doors opened to reveal a space that had been featured in architectural magazines but had never felt like a home. Margaret, his longtime housekeeper and the closest thing to family he had left, was waiting despite the late hour. One look at the soaked, frightened girls and she sprang into action without needing instructions. "Dear Lord," Margaret whispered, hurrying forward. "You poor things are freezing. Come with me, let's get you warm and dry." The twins hesitated, looking to each other first, then to Nathaniel. He nodded encouragingly, and they followed Margaret, leaving small puddles on the marble floor. Alone in his study, Nathaniel poured himself a scotch and called Carter Williams, his head of security. "I need a complete background check on two girls, probably around 15. First names Emily and Grace. They're from an orphanage called Hope's Haven." He paused, then added, "And I want everything you can find on the facility and its director." While waiting for his team to gather information, Nathaniel stood by the window, watching the city lights below. The responsible thing would be to call the authorities immediately. But something about the terror in Emily's eyes when Grace mentioned a shelter told him there was more to their story than simply running away. Margaret's soft knock interrupted his thoughts. "They're settled in the guest room, sir. I've given them some of your late wife's old clothes. Hope you don't mind. They were hungry, so I made them soup." She hesitated, then added, "Sir, those girls, they have bruises, old ones, new ones, and they flinch when anyone moves too quickly." Nathaniel's grip tightened on his glass. He knew those signs all too well from his own childhood. "Thank you, Margaret. Please stay tonight, if you don't mind. They might feel safer with you here." Around midnight, Carter called back. "Boss, you need to hear this. Hope's Haven has a spotless public record, but I found some buried complaints. Children disappearing from the system, reports of abuse that were mysteriously withdrawn, large cash deposits from anonymous donors, and the director, Victoria Parker. Her credentials don't check out. something clicked in Nathaniel's mind. The twins' desperation, the bruises, the elaborate escape, it all pointed to systematic abuse. His childhood memories of foster homes flooded back the fear, the helplessness, the longing for anyone to care enough to help. He made his decision then, knowing it would complicate his life immeasurably. These girls needed more than a warm bed for one night. They needed protection, support, and a chance at a real life. He had the resources to provide all of that and more. Walking quietly to the guest room, he found the door slightly ajar. The twins were asleep on the king-sized bed, still holding hands, their faces peaceful for the first time since he'd met them. On the bedside table lay a sketch Emily must have found his late wife's art supplies. The drawing showed two small figures in a storm, and a larger figure extending a hand toward them. The simple artwork carried more emotion than any words could express. Nathaniel closed the door gently and walked to his office. He spent the rest of the night making calls, pulling strings, and setting things in motion. By dawn, he had the beginnings of a plan. It would be challenging, possibly dangerous, and would certainly attract unwanted attention. But looking at the sunrise over Manhattan, Nathaniel Hayes knew he was finally ready to be the person he needed when he was their age of protector, an advocate, and maybe, someday, a father. The media storm broke faster than Nathaniel had anticipated. By noon the next day, someone at Hope's Haven had leaked the story to the press. Billionaire Hayes harboring runaway orphans screamed the headlines across every major news outlet in New York. Within hours, camera crews and reporters had set up camp outside his building, turning the sidewalk into a circus of flashing lights and shouted questions. Inside the penthouse, Emily and Grace watched the chaos unfold on TV with growing horror. "They're calling you a kidnapper," Grace whispered, her face pale as she read the scrolling headlines. Emily burst into tears, clinging to her sister. "This is all my fault. If I hadn't tried to." On the bridge. Nathaniel's phone rang constantly. His board of directors demanded an emergency meeting, concerned about the company's stock prices dropping. Major clients threatened to pull their investments. His Puerto Rico team was in crisis mode, trying to control the narrative. But the worst call came from Child Protective Services. "Mr. Hayes." The stern voice of Sarah Collins, head of CPS, cut through his explanations. "Regardless of your intentions, you cannot simply take minor children into your home without proper authorization. Mrs. Parker has filed a formal complaint, and we have concerns about the appropriateness of your living situation." The media began digging into Nathaniel's past, questioning his motives. They dredged up his wife and son's tragic death, suggesting he was trying to replace his lost family with vulnerable young girls. Conservative pundits painted him as a dangerous liberal elite undermining the foster care system. Liberal critics accused him of using the twins for publicity. Mrs. Parker played her part masterfully, appearing on morning shows in perfectly pressed suits, tears in her eyes as she spoke about her beloved girls and how worried she was for their safety. Emily has a history of emotional instability, she told one sympathetic interviewer, and Grace enables her destructive behavior. They need professional help, not a wealthy man's misguided charity. The situation reached a breaking point when protesters gathered outside Hayes Financial Group's headquarters. Half carried signs supporting Nathaniel's actions, praising him for protecting abused children. The other half demanded his arrest, accusing him of everything from kidnapping to child trafficking. But inside the penthouse, Nathaniel worked tirelessly with his legal team. Carter's investigation had uncovered disturbing patterns at Hope's Haven, but proving them would take time they didn't have. CPS was demanding immediate action, threatening to remove the girls forcibly if necessary. Grace found Nathaniel in his study late one night, surrounded by legal documents. "We should go," she said quietly, her voice breaking. "We're destroying your life, everything you've built." Nathaniel looked up, seeing not a troubled runaway, but a young woman carrying too much responsibility on her shoulders. "Listen to me carefully," he said, standing to face her. My life, my company, my reputation, none of that matters compared to keeping you and Emily safe. I've been where you are. I know what it's like to feel like a burden, to think running away is the answer. But I'm not giving up on you, and I'm not letting anyone take you back to that place." The breakthrough came unexpectedly. A young nurse from Hope's Haven, inspired by the media coverage, came forward with hidden camera footage showing systematic abuse. Former residents began speaking out, sharing similar stories of exploitation and cruelty. Journalists started digging deeper into Mrs. Parker's background, uncovering irregularities in her credentials. Public opinion began to shift. People were moved by the twins' obvious terror at the thought of returning to the orphanage. Child psychology experts spoke about the importance of keeping siblings together. Former foster children shared their own stories of institutional abuse, creating a groundswell of support for reform. Nathaniel made a decisive move. In a live television interview, he looked directly into the camera and spoke from his heart. 25 years ago, I was those girls. I know what it's like to feel powerless, to have the system fail you. I have the resources to protect these children, and I will use every penny I own, every connection I have, to ensure they never suffer abuse again. If that costs me my reputation or my fortune, so be it. The interview went viral. Stand with Hayes began trending on social media. Letters of support flooded in from around the world. But more importantly, the twins, watching from home, finally began to believe that maybe, just maybe, they had found someone who would never abandon them. The discovery came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, buried in a stack of documents Carter's team had obtained from county records. Nathaniel sat in his study, methodically reviewing files about Hope's Haven's founding, when a single photograph made his blood run cold. The image, dated 25 years ago, showed a younger Victoria Parker, then known as Sarah Hayes, standing outside St. Vincent's Hospital. Margaret, his voice cracked as he called for his housekeeper. She hurried in, concerned by his tone. "That box in my safe, the one with my adoption papers. I need it." Now Margaret returned moments later with a weathered manila envelope. With trembling hands, Nathaniel spread the documents across his desk, comparing dates and names. The truth hit him like a physical blow. Victoria Parker was Sarah Hayes, his biological mother. The woman terrorizing Emily and Grace was the same person who had abandoned him on a hospital doorstep a quarter-century ago. The revelation was almost too cruel to be coincidence. Carter arrived within the hour, looking grim. "There's more," he said, laying out additional files. "After she gave you up, she spent 2 years in psychiatric care, changed her name, created a new identity. The credentials she used to establish Hope's Haven, all fabricated during that period. She's been running from her past by controlling other children's futures." Nathaniel sat in stunned silence, memories flooding back. The way Mrs. Parker had looked at him during their confrontation about the twins, had there been a flicker of recognition? Did she know? The thought made him physically ill. His own mother had become the very monster he was fighting. In the living room, Emily was teaching Margaret to sketch while Grace read nearby. Their laughter drifted into the study, a stark contrast to the dark revelation unfolding within. Nathaniel watched them through the open door, seeing in their bond everything his mother had denied him. "What do we do with this information?" Carter asked quietly. "Going public could destroy her immediately, but it might also raise questions about your objectivity in the custody battle." Before Nathaniel could respond, Grace appeared in the doorway. Her intuitive nature had always made her sensitive to tension, and now she studied the scattered papers with concern. "What's wrong? Did something happen with our case?" Nathaniel quickly gathered the documents, but not before Grace caught sight of the hospital photograph. Her sharp mind made the connection instantly. She had seen enough recent pictures of Mrs. Parker in the media. "That's her, isn't it? But she looks so young. And the name." Grace, Nathaniel began, but she cut him off. "She's your mother, it wasn't a question. That's why she hates us so much. We represent everything she ran away from. Her voice trembled with the weight of understanding. Emily appeared behind her sister, sensing her distress. "What's going on?" she asked, but Grace was already moving, pulling her sister into a protective embrace. Nathaniel stood, facing the twins. "Yes, Victoria Parker is my biological mother, but this changes nothing about my commitment to protecting you both. If anything, it makes me more determined. I won't let her hurt anyone else the way she hurt me." The revelation created an unexpected bond between them. Emily moved first, stepping forward to take Nathaniel's hand. "You were alone," she said softly. "Like we were. But now none of us has to be alone anymore." Grace joined them, her analytical mind already working. "This is why you understood us from the beginning. You weren't just helping us, you were stopping history from repeating itself." As they stood there, united by shared pain and newfound understanding, Margaret quietly wiped away tears. The family they were building wasn't formed by blood, but by something stronger: the choice to break cycles of abandonment and abuse. Nathaniel looked at the twins, then at the photograph of his mother. "We're going to end this," he said firmly. "Not just for us, but for every child she's ever hurt. But we're going to do it right with truth, not vengeance." The rain outside had stopped, and sunlight broke through the clouds, casting long shadows across the study. In that moment, they all understood their battle had changed. It was no longer just about saving two girls from an abusive system, it was about healing wounds that stretched across generations. Sarah Thompson arrived at Hayes Tower precisely at 9 a.m., her government-issued ID badge gleaming against her crisp navy suit. At 42, she was the Department of Child Services' most respected investigator, known for her uncompromising standards and ability to see through deception. She had specifically requested the Hayes case, intrigued by the media circus surrounding it. "Mr. Hayes will see you now," the secretary announced, leading her into a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. Nathaniel stood to greet her, projecting confidence despite the dark circles under his eyes suggesting sleepless nights. "I appreciate you meeting with me on such short notice," Sarah began, setting up her recorder. "I understand the sensitivity of this situation, but I need complete honesty. My primary concern is the welfare of Emily and Grace Matthews." What followed was an intense 3-hour interview. Sarah probed every aspect of Nathaniel's life: his childhood, his marriage, his loss, his business dealings. She noticed how he tensed when discussing his own time in the foster system, how his voice softened when speaking about the twins. "Why these girls?" she asked directly. "Thousands of children need help. What made you risk everything for them specifically?" She watched his reaction carefully, trained to spot rehearsed answers. Nathaniel's response surprised her with its rawness. "Because when Emily stood on that bridge, I saw myself. When Grace tried to save her sister, I wished I'd had someone fight for me that way. It wasn't a choice, it was a responsibility to the child I once was." Sarah's next stop was the penthouse, where she found Emily and Grace with Margaret. The housekeeper excused herself, leaving Sarah alone with the twins. Unlike most children she interviewed, they sat close together, but didn't attempt to charm or persuade her. "Tell me about the night you left Hope's Haven," she prompted. What followed was a detailed account that matched none of the official reports she'd received. Grace described systematic abuse masked as discipline. Emily showed her sketchbook filled with dark images of their life at the orphanage. "Mrs. Parker said we were ungrateful," Emily whispered, her hand seeking her sister's. "She said no one would ever want damaged children like us. But Mr. Hayes, he looks at us like we matter." Sarah's instincts, honed by years of experience, told her these girls were telling the truth. But something else nagged at her, a feeling she couldn't quite place. The way Grace's eyes crinkled when she smiled, how Emily's hands moved when she spoke, it reminded her of someone. Back in her office that evening, Sarah pulled up Nathaniel's file again. His birth certificate listed his mother as Sarah Hayes, her own name, before marriage. The date matched. The hospital matched. 25 years ago, young and terrified, she had given up a baby boy for adoption. the realization hit her like a thunderbolt. Nathaniel Hayes was her son. The successful billionaire fighting to protect two vulnerable girls was the child she had never stopped thinking about, and Victoria Parker, she had taken Sarah's original name, perhaps as some twisted form of punishment. Sarah sat in her darkened office until midnight, wrestling with her discovery. Professional ethics demanded she recuse herself from the case immediately, but maternal instinct, long suppressed, urged her to stay, to protect not only the twins but the son she had given up. The next morning she made two decisions. First, she filed a preliminary report strongly supporting Nathaniel's custody petition, citing extensive evidence of abuse at Hope's Haven. Second, she wrote a letter to Nathaniel, revealing their connection. Whether to send it would be tomorrow's battle. As she left her office, Sarah passed a wall of children's drawings, artwork from cases she'd handled over the years. Among them was a sketch Emily had given her during their interview, three figures standing together while a fourth watched from a distance. The watching figure wore a navy suit. Sarah touched the drawing gently. In trying to save two girls from abandonment, she had found her way back to the child she had abandoned. The irony wasn't lost on her. Now she faced an impossible choice: maintain professional distance or acknowledge the truth that could either heal or destroy everything. The media frenzy reached fever pitch when anonymous sources leaked details about Sarah Thompson's preliminary report supporting Nathaniel's custody petition. Cable news channels ran split-screen coverage, one side showing protesters outside Hope's Haven, the other featuring legal experts debating the implications of a billionaire's intervention in child welfare. The question isn't whether these girls were abused, argued celebrity attorney Michael Blake on CNN. The question is whether a single man with no parenting experience, running a multi-billion-dollar corporation, can provide appropriate care for two traumatized teenagers. His opponent, child rights advocate Jessica Martinez, fired back, and an abusive orphanage can. At least Hayes is offering them safety and stability. Social media exploded with competing hashtags. Justice for Twins trended alongside Save Our Orphanages. Video clips of Mrs. Parker's tearful interviews circulated, countered by archived footage of Hope's Haven's questionable practices. Everyone had an opinion, but few knew the full story. The New York Times ran a front-page feature titled "The Price of Protection." When wealth meets child welfare, the article painted a complex picture, acknowledging both the potential benefits and risks of Nathaniel's intervention. Online comment sections became battlegrounds between those who saw him as a hero and others who suspected ulterior motives. Inside Hayes Tower, Nathaniel's PR team worked around the clock. They carefully selected media opportunities, arranged controlled interviews, and managed public perception. But it was an unscripted moment that changed the narrative. During a live morning show interview, Emily and Grace made a surprise appearance. "Mr. Hayes didn't save us," Grace said, her voice steady despite the cameras. "He gave us a choice. For the first time in our lives, someone asked what we wanted instead of telling us what we deserved." Emily added softly, "He showed us that family isn't about who owns you, but who loves you." Conservative radio host William Crawford launched a scathing attack. This is social engineering at its worst. A wealthy liberal using his money to bypass proper channels, undermining the very foundations of our childcare system. His words sparked outrage among his listeners, who began calling for government intervention. Mrs. Parker seized the opportunity, scheduling press conferences where former Hope's Haven success stories praised her leadership. But her campaign backfired when several of these success stories were revealed to be paid actors. The discovery led to deeper scrutiny of Hope's Haven's records. Religious organizations joined the debate. Some praised Nathaniel's Christian charity, while others questioned the morality of an unmarried man taking in young girls. LGBTQ groups rallied behind the twins, recognizing their fight to stay together as a fundamental rights issue. The pressure began affecting Hayes Financial Group. Several conservative investors withdrew their funds, causing a temporary stock price dip. Nathaniel's board suggested he distance himself from the controversy, but he refused. "Our company's values aren't just words on a website," he told them. "If standing up for these girls costs us money, so be it." A turning point came when a group of former foster children organized a peaceful demonstration outside the family court. They carried signs reading, "I wish someone had fought for Maine and children over system." Their personal stories of institutional abuse began shifting public opinion. Major newspapers investigated the broader issues of orphanage privatization and abuse. They uncovered systemic problems extending far beyond Hope's Haven, revealing a pattern of exploitation masked by charitable pretenses. Hope's Haven became a symbol of a broken system. Celebrity influencers picked sides. Some praised Nathaniel's courage, others questioned his motives. But it was a viral video of Grace helping Emily with her dyslexia homework, captured by Margaret and leaked online, that humanized the story. The intimate moment of sisterly love transcended the political debate. Sarah Thompson watched the media circus with growing concern. Her investigation had uncovered truth, but the public spectacle threatened to overshadow what mattered most: the welfare of two vulnerable children. She knew her next move could either calm the storm or create an even bigger controversy. As public interest intensified, Emily and Grace retreated further into the safety of Nathaniel's penthouse. They painted together, studied with tutors, and tried to ignore the chaos their story had created. But the weight of being at the center of a national debate took its toll, especially on Emily's fragile emotional state. While the media storm raged outside, life inside the Hayes penthouse settled into an unexpected rhythm. Nathaniel, who had spent years living by rigid schedules and business meetings, found himself adapting to the unpredictable flow of teenage life. Each morning brought new challenges and small victories that no boardroom could prepare him for. Margaret became the family's emotional anchor, her decades of service to Nathaniel evolving into something deeper as she helped guide the girls through their transition. She taught Emily how to bake chocolate chip cookies, a simple act that brought tears to the girls' eyes. It was the first time anyone had patiently shown her how to create something just for joy. Grace's academic brilliance emerged once she had access to proper resources. Nathaniel hired the best tutors, but often found himself helping her with advanced mathematics late into the night. These sessions frequently evolved into deep conversations about life, pain, and healing. One night, while solving complex equations, Grace finally opened up about their parents. "Dad wasn't always bad," she whispered. Pencil paused mid-calculation. "Sometimes, when he was sober, he'd tell us stories about Mom. How she loved to paint, just like Emily. How her laugh could light up a room." Nathaniel listened, understanding the complexity of loving parents who hurt you. But Emily's healing came through art. Nathaniel converted a spare room into a studio, filling it with professional supplies. At first, her paintings were dark, shadowy corridors of Hope's Haven, Mrs. Parker's looming figure, the bridge where everything changed. But gradually, color crept in. She painted Margaret baking, Grace studying, Nathaniel falling asleep at his desk with reading glasses askew. The first time Emily called Nathaniel Dad, it was accidental. He had just brought her hot chocolate after a nightmare, something he'd started doing when he realized she struggled to sleep. The word slipped out as she thanked him, and they both froze. "I'm sorry," she started to say, but Nathaniel gently cut her off. "Never apologize for how you feel, Emily. I'm honored." Trust built in small moments. When Grace got an A on her first proper school test, Nathaniel was the first person she wanted to tell. When Emily had a panic attack during a thunderstorm, she let Nathaniel hold her until it passed, something she'd never allowed anyone except Grace to do before. The family dinner became sacred time. Nathaniel rearranged his entire schedule to be home by 6, something that shocked his business associates. They ate in the kitchen instead of the formal dining room, sharing stories about their days. Margaret joined them, her place at the table unquestioned. Sometimes they laughed so hard they cried, other times they sat in comfortable silence, simply being together. The first major test of their growing bonds came when Emily caught the flu. Her fever spiked dangerously high one night, and Nathaniel rushed her to the emergency room. Grace was terrified the last time they'd been separated was at Hope's Haven. But Nathaniel arranged for her to stay in Emily's room, breaking several hospital rules in the process. He spent 3 nights sleeping in an uncomfortable chair, holding Emily's hand through the worst of it. Weekends became adventures. Nathaniel, realizing the girls had never experienced normal teenage activities, started planning outings. They went to museums, Broadway shows, and Central Park. Grace discovered a passion for ice skating. Emily fell in love with the Met's art collection. These excursions often drew paparazzi, but Nathaniel noticed the girls growing more confident, less afraid of the world. The breakthrough with Grace came during a thunderstorm. Nathaniel found her in his study at 3 a.m., going through old photo albums. "I want to understand," she said, showing him a picture of his late wife and son. "How do you love again after losing everything?" It was the first time anyone had asked him that directly. They talked until sunrise, sharing grief and hope in equal measure. Emily's transformation was more subtle but equally profound. She started leaving her artwork on Nathaniel's desk, small sketches of happy moments she wanted to remember. A family game night where Grace laughed so hard milk came out her nose. Margaret teaching them all to make homemade pasta. Nathaniel falling asleep reading to them on the couch. The most significant moment came during a charity gala Nathaniel had to attend. The girls insisted on coming to support him, despite their fear of crowds. When a reporter asked them about their unusual family situation, Emily spoke up. "Family isn't what you're born into," she said, gripping Nathaniel's hand. "It's who stays when everyone else leaves." As spring turned to summer, the penthouse transformed. Teenage giggles echoed through once silent halls. Grace's textbooks and Emily's art supplies scattered across every surface. Family photos, new ones, capturing their growing bond, replaced generic artwork on the walls. The space that had been merely a house for so long finally became a home. The first signs were subtle enough to dismiss. Emily seemed more tired than usual, bruising easily when she bumped into furniture. Grace noticed her sister's declining appetite, but attributed it to stress from their ongoing legal battles. Even Margaret's concerned glances at Emily's increasingly pale complexion were met with reassurances that she was just working too hard on her art projects. The crisis revealed itself during a family dinner celebration. Nathaniel had just received positive news about their custody case, and Margaret had prepared Emily's favorite pasta. As they toasted with sparkling cider, Emily suddenly collapsed, her glass shattering on the marble floor. The moment seemed to unfold in slow motion. Grace's scream, Nathaniel lunging to catch Emily, Margaret already dialing 911. The emergency room buzzed with controlled chaos as doctors rushed to stabilize Emily. Grace refused to leave her sister's side, holding her hand while medical staff drew blood and attached monitors. Nathaniel stood at the foot of the bed, his usual commanding presence reduced to helpless watching. Hours passed in a blur of tests and worried consultations. Dr. Sarah Chen, the hospital's top hematologist, delivered the diagnosis at dawn: acute myeloid leukemia. The words fell like bombs in the quiet hospital room. Grace's grip on Emily's hand tightened until her knuckles turned white. Nathaniel felt the world tilting beneath his feet. He had already lost a son, and now fate was threatening to take his daughter too. "The cancer is aggressive," Dr. Chen explained gently, "but we've caught it relatively early. Emily will need immediate chemotherapy, and ultimately a bone marrow transplant offers the best chance for long-term survival." She paused, looking at Grace. "Siblings are often the best potential donors. Would you be willing to be tested?" Grace's response was immediate: "Take whatever you need." "Just save my sister." Nathaniel watched his daughters, one unconscious, the other ready to move mountains to save her, and felt a fierce pride through his fear. This was what real family meant. The news leaked to the media within hours. Headlines screamed Hayes adoption drama, takes tragic turn and sick orphan girl's last hope. Mrs. Parker even attempted to use Emily's illness to challenge Nathaniel's custody, claiming the stress of leaving Hope's Haven had triggered the disease. Medical experts quickly dismissed this, but the added pressure took its toll on the family. Emily's hospital room became their new home. Nathaniel converted half the space into a makeshift office, running his company from a laptop while monitoring Emily's vital signs. Grace split her time between hospital visits and studying medical journals, determined to understand every aspect of her sister's treatment. Margaret brought homemade soup and fresh pajamas, trying to maintain some normalcy in their upended world. The first round of chemotherapy was brutal. Emily lost her hair, her appetite, and temporarily her love for art. The sight of her sketch pads made her hands shake too much to draw. But Grace found a way, guiding her sister's hands over the paper, their shared artwork becoming a symbol of their unbreakable bond. Late one night, when the hospital corridor was quiet except for the steady beep of monitors, Emily finally broke down. "I'm sorry," she sobbed into Nathaniel's chest. "You gave us everything, and now I'm just causing more trouble." Nathaniel held her fragile frame, feeling her tears soak through his shirt. "Listen to me," he whispered fiercely. "You are not trouble. You are my daughter, and we're fighting this together." The test results for Grace's bone marrow compatibility came back negative. The news devastated her for the first time in their lives. She couldn't protect Emily through sheer will and love. Nathaniel found her in the hospital chapel at midnight, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "I've never failed her before," Grace whispered. "What good am I as a sister if I can't save her?" Nathaniel activated every resource at his disposal. He launched a worldwide search for compatible donors, funded research into experimental treatments, and consulted with top specialists globally. Money could buy the best medical care, but it couldn't guarantee survival. This helplessness was new to him, a problem he couldn't solve by writing a check or making a phone call. Emily's illness changed their family dynamic in unexpected ways. The usual teenage barriers dissolved. There was no room for petty arguments or held grudges when every moment felt precious. Grace started sleeping in Emily's hospital room, their childhood habit of holding hands while sleeping restored. Nathaniel learned to braid Emily's remaining hair, his business-trained fingers becoming gentle with practice. Through it all, Emily showed unexpected strength. On good days, she turned her hospital room into an art gallery, covering walls with colorful drawings of the life she planned to live once she recovered. She drew herself graduating high school, Grace at college graduation, Nathaniel walking her down the aisle someday. These weren't just pictures, they were promises to survive. The discovery came through an unlikely source. While researching alternative treatments late one night, Grace stumbled upon a groundbreaking study linking certain forms of leukemia to kidney function. The article mentioned an experimental treatment protocol that had shown promising results, but it required a healthy kidney transplant to boost the patient's immune system before bone marrow transplantation. Grace spent 3 days consuming every medical journal she could find, building a case. When she finally presented her research to Dr. Chen, the physician was initially skeptical but intrigued. "The theory has merit," she admitted, reviewing Grace's meticulously organized notes. "But finding a compatible kidney donor who's willing to undergo major surgery for an experimental treatment, that's another challenge entirely." "Test me," Grace said without hesitation. "I know I'm not a bone marrow match, but maybe I can still save my sister." This way, her determination sparked a series of intense medical discussions. Dr. Chen consulted with colleagues worldwide, and gradually a consensus emerged. The procedure was risky, but offered real hope. Nathaniel struggled with the decision. The thought of both his daughters undergoing major surgery terrified him. "Grace, this is your future we're talking about," he argued during a family meeting. "Living with one kidney will affect you forever." Grace's response was immediate and firm. "A future without Emily isn't a future I want." Emily initially refused to consider it. "You've already given up so much for me," she told Grace during one of her stronger moments. "I won't let you risk your life too," but Grace was resolute. "Remember when we cut our fingers and became blood sisters at Hope's Haven? We promised to be part of each other forever. This is just making it official." The medical testing process was grueling. Grace underwent countless blood tests, scans, and psychological evaluations. Each positive result brought both hope and increased pressure. The medical team wanted to ensure she fully understood the implications of her decision. "You're only 16, the hospital psychiatrist reminded her. "This is a lifetime commitment." Grace's response became legendary among the hospital staff. "I've been committed to keeping my sister alive since the day we were born." This surgery just makes it physical instead of emotional. Her unwavering certainty moved even the most seasoned medical professionals. The media caught wind of the story, dubbing it the ultimate sister's sacrifice. Public interest intensified, with medical ethicists debating the appropriateness of allowing a minor to make such a momentous decision. Nathaniel fought to keep the details private, but Grace surprised everyone by agreeing to one carefully controlled interview. "People keep calling this a sacrifice," she told the journalist, Emily holding her hand throughout. "But sacrifice implies losing something. I'm not losing anything. I'm gaining a future with my sister. Besides," she added with a small smile, "she's already borrowed all my clothes. What's one kidney between sisters?" The night before the surgery, Nathaniel found the twins in Emily's hospital room, huddled together in the narrow bed like they used to at Hope's Haven. They were looking at old photographs, Emily and Grace on their first day at the orphanage, scared but holding hands. The same pose years later, in front of Nathaniel's Christmas tree. Always together, always connected. Dad, Grace called softly, using the term that had become natural over the months. "Will you stay with us tonight?" Nathaniel pulled up a chair, and they spent hours sharing memories and dreams. Emily sketched them all, her hands steady for the first time in weeks, creating a portrait of their unconventional but unshakable family. The morning of the surgery arrived with a pale winter sun. As the medical team prepared both girls, Nathaniel felt an overwhelming sense of déjà vu. The same hospital where he had lost his first family was now fighting to save his second. Margaret arrived early, bringing Grace's favorite comfort food for after the surgery and fresh art supplies for Emily's recovery. Just before they were wheeled into separate operating rooms, Grace reached for Emily's hand one last time. "See you on the other side, sis." "Don't forget we've got graduation to plan for," Emily squeezed back, tears rolling down her cheeks. "I love you, Grace. Thank you for never giving up on me." But Nathaniel kissed each daughter's forehead, then watched as they were taken in different directions. In the waiting room, he held Margaret's hand, both of them silent in their prayers and hopes. Hours ticked by, marked only by the steady rhythm of hospital life continuing around them. While Grace and Emily were in surgery, Carter rushed into the hospital waiting room, his face ashen. "Mr. Hayes, we have a problem. Mrs. Parker, she's been planning this all along." He handed Nathaniel a thick folder of documents, surveillance photos, and transcripts that painted a chilling picture of calculated revenge. The evidence was devastating. Mrs. Parker had recognized Nathaniel from the moment he first visited Hope's Haven. As his biological mother, she had tracked his success from afar for years, her bitterness growing with each news headline about his achievements. The twins became her unwitting pawns in a twisted game of retribution. She deliberately separated Emily and Grace from other children, subjected them to specific abuse patterns, Carter explained, pointing to documented incidents. "She was recreating your childhood trauma, Mr. Hayes, making them suffer as a way to punish you for succeeding without her." The surveillance photos showed Mrs. Parker meeting with dubious medical professionals months before Emily's diagnosis. Laboratory reports suggested Emily's food had been systematically contaminated with chemicals that could trigger leukemia. The revelation hit Nathaniel like a physical blow. His mother hadn't just abandoned him, she'd actively tried to destroy his new family. Margaret, who had been listening silently, suddenly remembered something. "The tea," she whispered. Mrs. Parker sent a package of specialty tea to the house after the girls moved in. Emily was the only one who drank it. Her hands trembled as she realized she had unknowingly served poison to her beloved charge. The evidence trail led to offshore accounts where Mrs. Parker had been stockpiling money from Hope's Heaven's donations. She had paid off health inspectors, bribed local officials, and maintained a network of collaborators. But her biggest investment had been in creating a medical crisis that would destroy both the twins and Nathaniel. As Nathaniel read through the documents, his horror turned to cold fury. Security camera footage from Hope's Haven showed Mrs. Parker in her office, meticulously planning each step. She had recorded video diaries, her hatred evident in every word. "He thinks he can replace me? Create a perfect family? I'll show him what it means to lose everything." Carter had already contacted the FBI, who were moving to arrest Mrs. Parker and her accomplices, but she had disappeared hours before, leaving behind a laptop with one final video message addressed to Nathaniel. The footage showed her sitting in her office, wearing the same cruel smile he remembered from his childhood. "My dear son." Her recorded voice dripped with sarcasm. "Did you really think I wouldn't recognize my own flesh and blood? You were supposed to fail without me, to prove that abandoning you was the right choice. Instead, you became everything I couldn't be. Those girls? They're just collateral damage in our family reunion." The hospital's chief of security implemented immediate protective measures around both operating rooms. FBI agents were stationed at every entrance, while Carter's team began tracking Mrs. Parker's possible locations. But Nathaniel could barely focus on the manhunt. His daughters were fighting for their lives because of his mother's insane vendetta. Sarah Thompson arrived amid the chaos, her face showing the strain of her own shocking discovery. "I should have seen it," she said, sitting heavily beside Nathaniel. "The way she fixated on your case, how she pushed to handle the investigation personally. She wasn't trying to protect the girl, she was gathering information for her endgame." The media exploded with the revelations. Orphanage Director S. Revenge Plot Targets Billionaire Son dominated headlines. Former Hope's Haven residents came forward with new accusations, describing how Mrs. Parker had used them in her obsessive surveillance of Nathaniel's life. In the sterile hospital corridor, Nathaniel stood at the window overlooking the city, his reflection haunted by the weight of responsibility. He had brought this danger into the twins' lives, yet they had never blamed him. Grace's willingness to sacrifice her kidney wasn't just about saving Emily, it was a declaration of trust in the family they had built together. Margaret touched his arm gently. "This isn't your fault," she said firmly. "You saved those girls from her. Now we'll protect them together." Her simple faith in him, unchanged since she'd first taken him in as a boy, gave him strength. Nathaniel squared his shoulders, ready to face whatever came next. Behind them, the operating room lights still glowed, holding the fate of two sisters whose only crime had been needing love. Their survival would be his ultimate victory over Mrs. Parker's hatred. As FBI agents coordinated their search and reporters gathered outside, Nathaniel made a silent vow his mother's revenge plot would be her last act of cruelty. His daughters would live, heal, and thrive not despite their shared trauma, but because they had found the strength to overcome it together. The legal storm that followed Mrs. Parker's exposure transformed from a simple custody battle into one of New York's most complex criminal cases. The district attorney's office filed multiple charges: attempted murder, child endangerment, fraud, and conspiracy. Each day brought new revelations as investigators unraveled decades of systematic abuse disguised as charitable work. Public opinion shifted dramatically overnight. The same media outlets that had questioned Nathaniel's motives now portrayed him as a hero who had unknowingly fought against his own mother to protect vulnerable children. Justice for Hayes family trended globally, with survivors of institutional abuse sharing their own stories of survival and redemption. In the courthouse, Nathaniel's legal team worked tirelessly to secure permanent custody of the twins while simultaneously assisting prosecutors. Carter's evidence proved crucial, revealing a network of corruption that extended far beyond Hope's Haven. Several state officials were implicated in covering up Mrs. Parker's activities in exchange for bribes and favors. The adoption proceedings, originally scheduled for routine review, became a symbol of the system's failure and potential redemption. Judge Maria Rodriguez, known for her tough stance on child welfare cases, took personal interest in the case. This courtroom has seen many battles over children's futures, she declared during one hearing, but rarely have we witnessed such clear evidence of both humanity's darkness and its capacity for love. Support came from unexpected quarters. Other orphanages across the country began internal investigations, leading to reforms in child care protocols. Celebrity advocates sponsored legislation dubbed the Hayes Act, aimed at increasing oversight of private child care facilities. Even conservative critics who had opposed Nathaniel's initial intervention now backed his fight for custody. Sarah Thompson's testimony proved particularly powerful. Standing before the grand jury, she detailed both Mrs. Parker's crimes and her own connection to the case. As a child services investigator and as a birth mother who gave up her own son, I can testify that Mr. Hayes has created something remarkable, a family built on choice, trust, and unconditional love. The legal proceedings coincided with Emily and Grace's recovery period. Hospital staff had to limit the flood of well-wishers and gifts that arrived daily. Children's art groups sent hundreds of handmade cards, while medical professionals worldwide offered their services pro bono. The girls' hospital room became a testament to human kindness, walls covered with messages of support from strangers touched by their story. Mrs. Parker remained at large, but her influence crumbled. Former employees came forward, describing how she had manipulated them through a combination of threats and false promises. Her academic credentials were exposed as forgeries, and her financial records revealed millions in embezzled charitable donations. The most damaging testimony came from a former Hope's Haven nurse who had witnessed Mrs. Parker's obsession with Nathaniel firsthand. She kept a room filled with news clippings about him, the nurse revealed. She would rage about his success, claiming he owed everything to her sacrifice. The twins became her weapons. She chose them specifically because they reminded her of her lost chance at motherhood. Nathaniel maintained his composure through the legal battles, but private moments told a different story. Margaret often found him in his study late at night, reviewing security measures or reading medical updates. "They're safe now," she would remind him, bringing his forgotten meals. "You've made sure of that." The custody hearing's final day arrived while Emily and Grace were still recovering. Judge Rodriguez allowed video testimony from their hospital room, where the twins spoke with remarkable poise about their journey from Hope's Haven to the Hayes family. Emily's artwork and Grace's research into her sister's treatment became exhibits, demonstrating their growth and resilience. "Mr. Hayes didn't just save us," Grace testified, her hospital gown visible on the courtroom screen. "He showed us that family isn't about biology or legal documents. It's about choosing to love and protect each other, no matter what." Emily, still weak but determined, added, "He's our dad because he earned that title, not because any paper says so." Judge Rodriguez's ruling was unequivocal. She granted Nathaniel full legal custody, praising his extraordinary dedication to these children's welfare in the face of unprecedented challenges. Furthermore, she recommended system-wide changes based on the case's findings, ensuring other children would benefit from the lessons learned. Outside the courthouse, hundreds of supporters celebrated the decision. Former foster children held signs reading "Thank you for fighting," while advocacy groups pledged to continue pushing for reforms. Nathaniel's brief statement to the press reflected both relief and determination. Today, justice wasn't just served, it was transformed. This victory belongs to every child who has ever needed someone to stand up and say, "You matter." The revelation came in the quiet hours after the custody hearing. Sarah Thompson sat in Nathaniel's study, holding an envelope that contained 25 years of unspoken truth. The twins were sleeping in their hospital room, their latest recovery updates showing promising signs. It was time. "Before I give you this," Sarah said, her professional composure wavering, "I want you to know that watching you fight for those girls helped me understand something I've questioned my whole life." She placed the envelope on his desk: birth records, adoption papers, and a handwritten letter she had carried for decades. Nathaniel opened the documents slowly, his hands steady despite the weight of the moment. The birth certificate listed Sarah Thompson, then Sarah Mitchell, as his biological mother, not Victoria Parker, who had stolen another woman's identity to torture the son she never had. The truth shifted everything he thought he knew about his past. "I was 19, Sarah began, her voice barely above a whisper. A freshman in college with dreams of helping children. When I found out I was pregnant, my parents gave me two choices: marriage to a man I didn't love or adoption. I chose to give you your best chance." Her eyes met his, searching for understanding or anger, finding instead a complex mix of emotions. The evidence was irrefutable. Medical records matched, DNA tests Sarah had quietly run confirmed it, and old photographs showed a young woman with Nathaniel's eyes and determined expression. Victoria Parker had discovered this truth years ago and used it to fuel her obsession, living vicariously through a connection that was never hers. "I tracked your life from afar," Sarah continued, pulling out newspaper clippings she had saved. "Your graduation, your company's success, your marriage. When I became a child services investigator, it was my way of protecting other children like I couldn't protect you. Then this case came across my desk." Nathaniel stood and walked to the window, processing the revelation. The woman who had fought to protect his daughters, who had helped expose Victoria Parker's crimes, was the same woman who had given him life and made the painful choice to give him a chance at a better future. "The day you took in Emily and Grace," Sarah said softly, "I saw you become the kind of parent I had hoped you'd find when I let you go. You didn't just give them a home, you gave them the love and protection I wanted for you." The silence between them held years of unasked questions and unspoken words. Finally, Nathaniel turned back to her. "All these years fighting Victoria Parker's hatred, I never knew I had a mother who loved me enough to put my needs first." Sarah's composure broke. "When I saw how you fought for those girls, I realized I had to tell you the truth. Not to claim any right to your life, but to let you know that you were always wanted, always loved. Your strength in protecting them, that's the future I prayed for when I held you that last time." The conversation lasted through the night. They shared stories, filled in gaps, and began building a bridge across 25 years of separation. Sarah brought out more photos herself at 19, holding a newborn Nathaniel, her tears staining the hospital blanket. "I memorized every detail of your face," she admitted. "I've carried you in my heart every day since." Margaret found them at dawn, still talking. She took one look at the scattered documents and photos and quietly brought fresh coffee. Her presence completed a circle: the woman who had raised Nathaniel with love standing witness as he reconnected with the woman who had loved him enough to let him go. The twins should know, Nathaniel decided as morning light filled the study. They of all people understand that family is more than blood or legal documents. It's about choices made from love. Sarah nodded, tears falling freely now. "I'd like to know my granddaughters, if you'll allow it." Later that morning, in the hospital room where Grace and Emily were recovering, Nathaniel shared the truth. The twins listened intently, their hands clasped together as always. When he finished, it was Emily who spoke first. "So we all found each other because we needed healing." Grace smiled at Sarah, who stood nervously by the door. "Does this mean we have two grandmothers now?" Margaret, and you, the simple question, broke the tension, drawing laughs and tears from everyone. Sarah crossed to the beds, taking each girl's free hand in hers. "If you'll have me," she said softly. The family circle had expanded in unexpected ways. Victoria Parker's hatred had intended to destroy them all, but instead had led them to this moment of healing and connection. As morning sunlight streamed through the hospital windows, 4 generations of chosen family Margaret, Sarah, Nathaniel, and the twins shared their first moment together, bound not by biology or legal documents, but by the conscious choice to love and protect each other. The first signs of rejection appeared 3 days after the seemingly successful transplant surgery. Emily's fever spiked suddenly in the middle of the night, her body fighting against the very gift her sister had given to save her. Grace, still recovering in the adjacent hospital room, sensed something was wrong before the alarms even started blaring. "Her numbers are dropping," Dr. Chen announced grimly, studying the latest test results. "The immune response is more aggressive than we anticipated." The medical team rushed to adjust medications, but Emily's condition continued to worsen. Her skin took on a yellowish tint, and her breathing became increasingly labored. Grace insisted on being wheeled to her sister's room, ignoring her own post-surgery pain. "You have to fight, Em," she whispered, clutching Emily's burning hand. "My kidney's in there. You can't reject it. It's already part of you, just like I've always been." Emily stirred restlessly, too weak to respond, but somehow still holding on to her sister's voice. Nathaniel watched helplessly as his younger daughter slipped away from them hour by hour. The business titan who could solve any problem with money or influence found himself powerless against his daughter's failing body. Sarah and Margaret took turns sitting with him, their newly formed family united in fear and hope. Dr. Chen proposed a radical solution and experimental treatment that might help Emily's body accept the kidney, but carried its own severe risks. The medication could save her, she explained, but it might also cause permanent damage to her other organs. "We need to decide quickly." Grace immediately spoke up from her wheelchair. "Do it." Emily would take any chance to live. She proved that on the bridge the memory of that rainy night hung heavy in the room. Nathaniel nodded his agreement, signing the consent forms with a hand that refused to tremble. The next 48 hours became a blur of medical procedures and anxious waiting. Emily's room filled with beeping machines and worried whispers. Her art supplies lay untouched on the bedside table, the sketches of her planned future collecting dust. Grace refused to return to her own room, camping out in a recliner despite the nurse's protests. Sarah used her medical contacts to consult specialists worldwide, while Margaret maintained a constant prayer vigil. Nathaniel paced the corridors, remembering another hospital, another vigil, another time he faced losing his family. But this time was different. This time he wasn't alone. Emily's condition reached its critical point during a stormy night that echoed the one when they first met. Her breathing became so labored that doctors considered intubation. Grace, exhausted but determined, lay in the bed next to her sister, telling stories about their shared future college plans, travel dreams, the family celebrations they would have. "Remember when we promised to see Paris together?" Grace whispered, her voice hoarse from hours of talking. "You have to wake up so you can paint the Eiffel Tower. Dad promised to take us, remember? And now we have Grandma Sarah and Margaret to come too. Our family keeps growing. Em, you have to stay and grow with it." The hospital chapel became Nathaniel's refuge during the darkest hours. It was there that Sarah found him one morning, staring at the stained glass windows as dawn broke. "I can't lose another child," he said quietly. "I can't watch Grace lose her sister. How do you survive something like that?" Sarah took his hand, their shared pain building another bridge between them. "We survived by believing in the love that brought us all together." Emily didn't jump that night on the bridge because she found something to live for. She has to remember that now. As Emily fought for her life, the public held its breath. Social media filled with messages of support, and Pray Formally trended worldwide. Artists sent paintings to decorate her room, and children's hospitals across the country sent cards and gifts. The girl who once thought no one would care if she jumped had become a symbol of hope and resilience. Grace's breaking point came exactly 1 week after Emily's condition deteriorated. She had been maintaining a brave face, spending every moment by her sister's bedside, but the strain of watching Emily fight for her life while carrying the weight of a failed transplant finally proved too much. The breakdown began when Dr. Chen arrived for her morning rounds. As the doctor examined Emily's latest test results, Grace noticed her sister's favorite sketch pad had slipped to the floor. When she bent to retrieve it, a wave of dizziness hit her own body still recovering from surgery, and she collapsed. "I killed her," Grace sobbed as Nathaniel helped her back into the wheelchair. "My kidney wasn't good enough. I failed her. I always promised to protect her, and now I'm the reason she's dying." Her words dissolved into hysterical crying, years of pent-up responsibility and fear pouring out in a flood of emotion. Nathaniel pulled her into his arms, feeling her entire body shake with grief. "Listen to me, Grace. You didn't fail anyone. You gave Emily the greatest gift possible, a chance to live. Her body's reaction isn't your fault." But Grace was beyond comfort, her usual rationality shattered by exhaustion and guilt. Sarah found them in the hospital chapel later that night, Grace curled up in a ball on one of the wooden pews. "I was supposed to be the strong one," she whispered as her newfound grandmother sat beside her. "Ever since we were little, I've been the one who fixed everything. Why can't I fix this?" The facade of the perfect older sister, the brilliant student, the unfailing protector, it all crumbled in that quiet chapel. Grace finally allowed herself to be 16, scared and overwhelmed. What if she dies thinking I didn't try hard enough? What if my kidney kills her? How do I live with that? Margaret brought Grace's favorite comfort foods, but they sat untouched. The girl who had meticulously researched medical journals and challenged doctors now sat silent in her sister's room, lost in a spiral of self-blame. Her own surgical incision became infected from neglecting her recovery, but she refused to leave Emily's side for treatment. "I promised her on the bridge," Grace told Nathaniel during one of her more lucid moments. "I said we'd stay together forever. If she dies because my kidney wasn't compatible, I'm breaking that promise. Just like our parents broke their promises. Just like everyone else who abandoned us." The hospital psychologist recommended separating the sisters temporarily, concerned about Grace's deteriorating mental state. Nathaniel refused. They'd been each other's lifeline since birth, he argued. Forcing them apart now would do more harm than good. Instead, he set up a rotation. Sarah took the day shift, reading medical updates and managing Emily's care while trying to engage Grace in conversation. Margaret handled evenings, gently coaxing Grace to eat and take her medications. Nathaniel took the night watch, holding his daughter as she alternated between tears and desperate prayers. The turning point came unexpectedly. During one of Emily's brief periods of consciousness, she managed to squeeze Grace's hand and whisper, "Not your fault, G. Still love you." The simple words, barely audible above the medical equipment's beeping, broke through Grace's wall of guilt. Grace finally allowed herself to be admitted to the adjacent room for treatment of her infection. As nurses tended to her wounds, she spoke to Sarah about the weight she'd carried since childhood. "I thought if I was perfect enough, smart enough, strong enough, I could protect Emily from everything. But I can't control everything, can I?" Sarah stroked her granddaughter's hair, seeing in Grace's dedication to Emily echoes of her own choices regarding Nathaniel. "Sometimes the strongest thing we can do is admit we're not in control," she said softly. "Your love for Emily isn't measured by your ability to save her. It's measured by your willingness to try." That night, for the first time since Emily's decline, Grace slept in her own hospital bed. Nathaniel sat between his daughter's rooms, watching both their monitors, realizing that healing would have to happen for both sisters, not just in body, but in heart and mind as well. The moment Nathaniel had been dreading arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning. Dr. Chen requested a private meeting in her office, her expression grave as she laid out Emily's latest test results. The experimental treatment wasn't working as hoped, and Emily's body was still rejecting Grace's kidney while her leukemia continued to advance. "We have two options," Dr. Chen explained, her voice gentle but direct. "We can continue the current treatment, hoping for a miracle but risking both the kidney and Emily's remaining time. Or," she paused, "we can remove Grace's kidney, putting Emily back on dialysis, and try an aggressive new chemotherapy protocol that might give her a fighting chance against the leukemia." The choice was impossible. Keep Grace's kidney in place, honoring her sacrifice but potentially hastening Emily's death, or remove it, effectively negating everything Grace had endured while pursuing a different path that offered no guarantees. Either way, he risked losing one daughter while devastating the other. Sarah found him in the hospital garden hours later, sitting alone on a bench where he used to bring the girls for fresh air. "I can't make this decision," he confessed as she sat beside him. "How do I choose between my daughters' hearts? If I remove the kidney, Grace will never forgive herself. If I leave it, and Emily dies faster." The weight of fatherhood had never felt heavier. This wasn't like running a corporation where every problem had a solution if you just worked hard enough. This was life and death, hope and despair, love and loss all tangled together with no clear path forward. Margaret brought him coffee and memories. "Remember when Emily first called you Dad?" she said softly. "You told her never to apologize for how she feels. Maybe it's time to take your own advice. Trust your heart, not just your head." The hospital's ethics committee met to discuss the case, offering their professional opinions, but ultimately leaving the decision in Nathaniel's hands. As Emily's legal guardian, he alone had to make the choice. The pressure mounted as her condition continued to decline. Grace, still recovering from her own infection, sensed something was wrong. "Dad," she confronted him late one night, "what aren't you telling me?" Looking into her eyes, so much like Emily's, Nathaniel couldn't lie. As he explained the situation, he watched his daughter's face crumple, then reshape itself with determined strength. "We have to take it out," Grace said, her voice shaking but certain. "My kidney was supposed to save her, not kill her faster. Emily needs a chance to fight the cancer first. We can try another transplant later when she's stronger." Her selflessness in that moment nearly broke him. But Emily, during a brief period of lucidity, had different ideas. "Keep it," she whispered when told of the options. "Grace is literally part of me now. If I'm going to fight, I want to fight with her strength inside me." The sisters' opposing wishes added another layer to Nathaniel's impossible choice. Sarah approached him with yet another perspective. "Sometimes being a parent means making decisions our children don't agree with," she said, her own experience of giving up baby Nathaniel heavy in her words. "We choose what gives them their best chance, even if it breaks our hearts." The deadline for decision loomed as Emily's vital signs became increasingly unstable. Nathaniel spent a night reviewing every medical document, consulting with specialists worldwide, and praying for clarity. In the end, it wasn't the medical data that helped him decide, it was watching his daughters sleep, their hands still clasped despite tubes and monitors. He made his choice at dawn, carrying the weight of knowledge that whatever he decided would change his family forever. As he signed the consent forms, his hand was steady, but his heart thundered with the responsibility of choosing a path that would affect both his daughters' lives irrevocably. Nathaniel's decision was to keep Grace's kidney in Emily, honoring both sisters' deepest wishes, Grace's sacrifice and Emily's determination. He announced his choice in Emily's hospital room, with both girls, Sarah and Margaret, present. The tension in the air was palpable as Dr. Chen arrived to hear his decision. "We fight together," Nathaniel declared, his voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm him. "Emily, you'll keep Grace's kidney. But we're adding a new experimental immunosuppressant therapy from Switzerland." He turned to Dr. Chen. "I've arranged for Dr. Weber from Zurich to fly in. He's had success with similar cases." The next 48 hours became a whirlwind of activity. Dr. Weber arrived with his team, bringing new hope and advanced treatment protocols. The Swiss doctor, a pioneer in transplant immunology, had developed a groundbreaking approach that might help Emily's body accept Grace's kidney while still fighting the leukemia. Grace's relief was visible, her entire body relaxing for the first time in weeks. "Thank you, Dad," she whispered, hugging him fiercely. "I couldn't bear the thought of taking my kidney back. It belongs with Emily now." The wisdom in her young voice reminded him again of how much his daughters had endured. Emily's response to the new treatment was gradual but promising. Her fever began to stabilize, and her body showed signs of accepting the kidney. Dr. Weber's approach, combining Eastern and Western medicine with cutting-edge immunotherapy, seemed to be finding the delicate balance they desperately needed. Sarah threw herself into coordinating Emily's care, her years of child services experience proving invaluable in navigating the complex medical system. She worked tirelessly with Dr. Weber's team, ensuring every detail was perfect. "I couldn't save you from pain," she told Nathaniel quietly, "but I can help save your daughter." Margaret maintained her steady presence, becoming the family's emotional anchor. She kept track of medication schedules, made sure everyone ate, and provided the practical support that kept their world turning. Her unwavering faith gave them strength when medical science reached its limits. The turning point came during an art therapy session suggested by Dr. Weber. Emily, stronger but still fragile, picked up her sketchbook for the first time in weeks. She drew a single kidney, but instead of medical accuracy, she created it as a heart shape with two sides representing her and Grace. "It's us," she explained softly. "Two halves of one whole." Grace, watching her sister draw, finally allowed herself to cry, not from guilt this time, but from relief and hope. The sisters held each other, their bond stronger than any medical challenge. Nathaniel captured the moment in a photo that would later become Emily's first painting during her recovery. Dr. Weber's updates became increasingly positive. "The kidney is functioning better than expected," he reported. "Emily's immune system is learning to work with it rather than against it. It's as if her body has finally recognized that this is not just any kidney, it's her sister's gift of life." The media caught wind of the Swiss doctor's involvement, and new headlines emerged. "Revolutionary treatment offers hope to Hayes' sisters," but Nathaniel had learned to ignore the press, focusing solely on his daughter's recovery. The public's opinion mattered far less than Emily's latest test results or Grace's renewed smile. Late one night, as Nathaniel sat between his daughter's rooms, Sarah joined him in his vigil. "You made the right choice," she said softly. "Not the safe choice or the logical choice, but the one that honored their love for each other. That's what real parenting is, trusting the bonds that hold us together." Emily's artistic progress became a measure of her physical improvement. Each day, her drawings grew stronger, more detailed, more hopeful. She created a series of sketches titled "The Journey," documenting her and Grace's story from the bridge to the hospital. The final piece showed their entire family: Nathaniel, Grace, Sarah, Margaret, and herself standing together, whole and healing. Victoria Parker was found in a small monastery in upstate New York, where she had fled after her plot unraveled. The FBI agents who arrived to arrest her found not the defiant director of Hope's Haven, but a broken woman clutching newspaper clippings about Emily's illness and Grace's sacrifice. Her confession came not in a police interrogation room, but in Emily's hospital room, where she had begged to be allowed one visit before facing justice. Under heavy security and against his better judgment, Nathaniel permitted the meeting, wanting closure for his daughters. "I thought hurting you would heal something in me," Mrs. Parker said, her voice barely above a whisper as she faced the family she had tried to destroy. "But watching these girls, seeing their love for each other, their strength." She stopped, tears falling freely. "It showed me everything I never was, everything I could have been." The truth poured out in a torrent of guilt and regret. She revealed how she had discovered Sarah's identity as Nathaniel's real mother and stolen it, creating an elaborate fantasy of maternal rights. Her obsession with punishing Nathaniel had consumed her, twisting her pain into a weapon that nearly cost Emily her life. Grace listened silently, her hand protectively clasped with Emily's. When Mrs. Parker finished, it was Grace who spoke first. "You tried to separate us because you couldn't bear seeing the bond you never had. But love isn't about possession, it's about letting go when you need to and holding on when it matters." Emily, still weak but clear-eyed, added softly, "We forgive you, Mrs. Parker. Not because you deserve it, but because holding on to hate would make us like you were. We choose to be better." Her simple words carried more weight than any punishment the justice system could devise. Mrs. Parker broke down completely, falling to her knees beside Emily's bed. "I poisoned your food," she confessed through sobs. "I chose you both because you reminded me of the child I never had the courage to love. I wanted to prove that all love fails, that all families break. But you proved me wrong in the most beautiful way." The information about the poisoning provided crucial medical insight. Dr. Weber immediately adjusted Emily's treatment protocol based on the specific toxins Mrs. Parker had used. Her confession might have come too late to prevent the damage, but it offered new hope for Emily's recovery. Nathaniel watched the scene unfold, feeling an unexpected pity for the woman who had caused so much pain. "The difference between you and Sarah," he said quietly, "is that she gave me up to give me a better life. You tried to destroy lives to feed your own pain." Mrs. Parker nodded, accepting the truth of his words. Before being led away by federal agents, she handed Emily a key. "In my office at Hope's Haven, there's a safe behind the painting of the lighthouse. Inside, you'll find evidence of every child I've wronged, every family I've torn apart. Use it to help them heal." The safe's contents led to a massive investigation, resulting in dozens of reunited families and reformed adoption policies. Mrs. Parker's detailed records, kept as trophies of her manipulation, became tools for healing and justice. In the end, Mrs. Parker pleaded guilty to all charges, accepting a lengthy prison sentence, but her greatest punishment was witnessing the triumph of the family bonds she had tried to break. Emily's recovery accelerated with the new treatment insights, while Grace blossomed with the weight of guilt lifted from her shoulders. Before being transferred to federal prison, Mrs. Parker wrote one final letter to the Hayes family, in trying to prove that love always fails. She wrote, "I instead proved that real love can survive anything. Your family isn't beautiful despite the pain I caused. It's beautiful because you transformed that pain into something stronger than hate." The letter was read aloud in Emily's hospital room, where the family had gathered to celebrate her latest positive test results. As Sarah folded the letter away, she looked at Nathaniel, then at the twins. "Sometimes," she said softly, "our greatest mistakes lead to unexpected blessings. Mrs. Parker's hatred brought us all together, and her confession might help save Emily's life." Among the documents in Mrs. Parker's safe was a thick folder labeled Matthews, containing the full truth about Emily and Grace's parents. Carter brought the file to Nathaniel first, allowing him to decide whether the girls were strong enough to handle the revelations it contained. The story that emerged was far different from what the twins had been told. Their mother, Rebecca Matthews, hadn't died in childbirth as they believed. She had been a talented artist who suffered from severe postpartum depression. Their father, Robert Matthews, had created the story of her death to shield the girls from a more painful truth. Their mother had attempted suicide shortly after their birth and spent years in psychiatric care. The file contained letters Rebecca had written to her daughters but never sent, each one expressing her love and regret. She had painted portraits of the twins as babies, documented their first months, and fought her personal demons while trying to be the mother they deserved. Her artwork, preserved in the file, showed the same talented hand that Emily had inherited. Robert's descent into alcoholism came not from grief over losing his wife, but from guilt over separating her from their daughters. Mrs. Parker's records revealed that she had manipulated Robert's vulnerability, convincing him that selling his parental rights would give the girls a better life while providing money for Rebecca's treatment. "Your parents need to know this," Nathaniel told Sarah and Margaret after reading the file. but the timing has to be right. Emily's recovery comes first. They agreed to wait, but fate had other plans. During one of Emily's art therapy sessions, she created a painting that bore a striking resemblance to one of Rebecca's works. When Grace saw the similarity, she began asking questions. The twins had always been too perceptive to shield from the truth for long. Nathaniel gathered them in Emily's hospital room, now bright with her recovery artwork, and shared their parents' story. "Your mother never stopped loving you," he said gently, showing them Rebecca's letters and artwork. "She fought her illness every day, trying to get well enough to find you." Emily traced her mother's signature on one of the paintings, recognizing elements of her own artistic style. Grace, ever practical, asked the question they were both thinking. "Are they still alive?" Nathaniel nodded. "Your mother completed her treatment 5 years ago. She's been searching for you ever since." "Your father." He paused. "Entered rehab after selling his rights. He's been sober for 3 years." The revelation that both their parents were alive and had fought their own battles for redemption hit the twins hard. Emily's monitors showed her elevated heart rate as she processed the news. Grace moved to her sister's bed, their hands finding each other automatically. "Would you like to meet them?" Nathaniel asked carefully. "They don't know we've found the truth, but I can arrange it if you want. Only when you're both ready." The sisters exchanged a long look, years of shared pain and understanding passing between them. "They're our birth parents," Grace said slowly, "but you're our dad." "This doesn't change that." Emily nodded in agreement. "We want to meet them, but not yet. First, I need to get stronger." And she squeezed Grace's hand. "We need time to be the family we become." The file contained one final surprise: a recent photo of Rebecca and Robert, now divorced but both sober and healing, at an art gallery showing Rebecca's work. Her paintings told stories of loss, mental illness, and redemption. Robert had become a counselor for other parents struggling with addiction. "They found their way back to themselves," Sarah observed, studying the photo. "Just like I did. Sometimes the longest journey is the one that leads us home." Margaret wiped away tears as she looked at her expanded family: birth parents, adopted parents, grandmothers and sisters, all connected by love that transcended biology and pain. Nathaniel watched his daughters absorb their history, seeing them process this new layer of their identity. The truth hadn't broken them, it had given them context for their strength. Their parents' struggles with mental illness and addiction weren't a legacy of shame, but a testimony to the healing power of love and determination. Spring arrived with the kind of renewal that seemed almost too perfect to be real. Emily's recovery, once deemed nearly impossible, progressed with miraculous speed under Dr. Weber's innovative treatment protocol. The combination of Grace's kidney, the new immunotherapy, and the knowledge of the specific toxins Mrs. Parker had used allowed the medical team to create a perfectly tailored treatment plan. 6 weeks after Nathaniel's decision to keep Grace's kidney, Emily took her first steps in the hospital garden. Grace supported her sister on one side, Nathaniel on the other, while Sarah and Margaret watched with tears of joy. The moment was captured in a photograph that would later hang prominently in the Hayes home, marking the beginning of their new chapter. The decision to reunite with Rebecca and Robert Matthews came naturally as Emily grew stronger. The meeting was arranged in the hospital's family room, decorated with Emily's recovery artwork. When Rebecca walked in, everyone was struck by how much Emily resembled her mother: the same artistic hands, the same sensitive eyes. Robert followed, sober and humbled, carrying 2 small boxes containing mementos from the twins' early childhood. "My babies," Rebecca whispered, stopping a few feet from the girls, respecting their space. Emily moved first, drawn to the artist in her mother. Grace held back, protective as always, until she saw the genuine pain and love in her father's eyes. The reunion wasn't perfect. There were tears, difficult questions, and moments of awkward silence, but it was honest. Rebecca shared her journey through mental illness, showing the twins her art journals that documented her fight to reclaim her life. Robert spoke of his battles with addiction and his work helping other parents in recovery. The twins listened, not ready to forgive completely but willing to understand. Nathaniel watched the interaction with a complex mix of emotions. Sarah squeezed his hand, understanding his fear of losing his daughters to their birth parents. But Grace put those fears to rest when she introduced him. "This is our dad," she said firmly. "He chose us when no one else would," Emily added softly. "He saved us in every way possible." The expanded family dynamic evolved naturally. Rebecca began visiting regularly, sharing art techniques with Emily and helping her develop her talent. Robert attended Grace's academic competitions, proud of her achievements while respecting the boundaries she set. Sarah and Margaret welcomed them into the support system they'd built, understanding that love multiplies rather than divides. Emily's art took on new dimensions as she processed her expanded family story. She created a series called Roots and Wings, depicting the complex web of love, loss, and redemption that had brought them all together. The pieces showed remarkable maturity, blending her inherited talent with her lived experience. The hospital staff organized a small celebration when Emily was finally cleared for discharge. Dr. Weber, preparing to return to Switzerland, marveled at her recovery. "In all my years of medicine," he said, "I've never seen healing quite like this. It's as if your body finally understood that it was surrounded by love." Grace, fully recovered from her surgery, threw herself into planning Emily's homecoming. The penthouse was transformed with art supplies in every room, creating spaces for Emily to continue her therapeutic creativity. Rebecca contributed an easel that had helped her own recovery, while Robert installed special lighting to make painting easier during Emily's rest periods. But on the morning Emily finally came home, she found her hospital room artwork professionally framed and hung throughout the penthouse. Each piece told part of their story: the bridge where it began, the hospital room where they became a true family, the garden where she took her first recovery steps. But the centerpiece was a new painting, one Emily had created specially for the occasion, a family portrait showing all of them together: Nathaniel, Grace, Sarah, Margaret, Rebecca, and Robert, with Emily at the center, whole and healing. Word of Emily's recovery reached Mrs. Parker in federal prison, where she had begun serving her 15-year sentence. The news arrived in the form of a newspaper article about the Hayes family's art exhibition, featuring Emily's Roots and Wings series. The photo showed the young artist standing proudly between her sister and Nathaniel, radiating health and happiness. Mrs. Parker's transformation began quietly in her prison cell. She started by documenting every child who had passed through Hope's Haven, working with federal investigators to ensure each case was properly reviewed. But her meticulous records, once kept as trophies of control, became tools for healing as families were notified and support services were arranged. The prison counselor noticed the change first. The formerly proud director now spent hours in the prison library, studying child psychology and trauma recovery. She volunteered to teach art classes to inmates' children during visiting hours, showing a gentleness no one had previously witnessed. During these sessions, she would often speak of Emily and Grace, using their story to illustrate the power of love over hatred. 6 months into her sentence, Mrs. Parker received an unexpected letter. Inside was one of Emily's sketches, a portrait of Mrs. Parker herself, not as the monster she had been, but as the wounded soul Emily had come to understand. The accompanying note read, "We learned that healing is possible for everyone. Your pain doesn't have to define you." Moved by this gesture, Mrs. Parker began writing a book documenting the systematic abuse in private orphanages, exposing the corrupt practices she had once championed. All proceeds were directed to a fund for survivors of institutional abuse, managed by the Hayes Foundation. She refused to profit from her story, insisting that her only goal was prevention and healing. Grace's influence appeared in an unlikely way when Mrs. Parker established a tutoring program for juvenile offenders in the prison. "A brilliant young girl once showed me that knowledge without compassion is meaningless," she told the prison board. The program's success rate in reducing recidivism attracted national attention to the power of education in rehabilitation. On the first anniversary of Emily's recovery, Mrs. Parker received another visitor, Sarah Thompson. The two women who had both claimed to be Nathaniel's mother sat across from each other in the prison visiting room. "I came because they asked me to," Sarah explained, placing a photo album on the table. "They want you to see what real family looks like." The album contained images of the past year Emily's art shows, Grace's academic awards, family dinners that included both birth and chosen family members. Each photo showed the healing and joy Mrs. Parker's hatred had failed to destroy. The last page held a surprisingly personal note: "Thank you for showing us what love isn't, so we could recognize what it is." Mrs. Parker's redemption wasn't marked by grand gestures but by small, consistent actions. She wrote personal apologies to every child she had harmed at Hope's Haven. She developed rehabilitation programs for other inmates struggling with obsession and control issues. Her own healing became a testament to the transformative power she had once tried to destroy. When Emily's first major gallery showing opened in Manhattan, Mrs. Parker watched the live-streamed event from the prison library. The centerpiece was a triptych titled "Forgiveness," depicting 3 stages of healing: pain, understanding, and release. In her artist's statement, Emily acknowledged Mrs. Parker's influence. "Sometimes our greatest teachers show us what to overcome." The final gesture of forgiveness came in an official letter from the Hayes family supporting Mrs. Parker's petition for early release to a rehabilitation facility, where she could continue her work with troubled youth. The letter, signed by both Emily and Grace, stated simply, "Some chains are made of iron, others of hatred. We choose to break both." The auditorium at Yale School of Art buzzed with excitement on graduation day. Emily Matthews Hayes sat among her fellow graduates, her artist's hands fidgeting with her graduation robe. In the audience, her extraordinary family filled 2 full rows, a testament to how love can expand beyond all boundaries. Nathaniel sat between Grace, now a second-year medical student at Harvard, and Sarah, who had retired from child services to help run the Hayes Foundation. Margaret beamed proudly from her seat, while Rebecca and Robert watched their daughter with quiet joy. Even Mrs. Parker, recently released and working at a youth rehabilitation center, had been invited to attend, sitting quietly at the end of the row. Emily's graduation piece, displayed prominently in the university gallery, told their story in stunning detail. Titled "The Bridge," it was a massive installation that transformed based on the viewer's perspective. From one angle, it showed the desperate night of attempted suicide, from another, the moment of rescue, and from the center, the family they had become. Art critics called it a masterpiece of emotional storytelling, but to the Hayes family, it was simply their truth rendered in paint and light. Grace's graduation speech, as valedictorian of her class, had moved many to tears. "5 years ago, I gave my sister a kidney," she began. "She gave me back the ability to trust in miracles." Now, watching Emily receive her diploma, Grace felt the familiar warmth, where her donated kidney used to be a phantom reminder of their unbreakable bond. After the ceremony, the family gathered in the gallery where Emily's work was displayed. Nathaniel watched his daughter's embrace, remembering the terrified girls from the bridge. Grace wore her white medical student's coat over her dress, already eager to return to her research on organ transplant rejection. Emily's artist's smock was splattered with paint, evidence of last-minute touches to her installation. Sarah organized a family photo in front of the bridge, a recreation of the photograph taken the day Emily came home from the hospital, but with 5 years of healing visible in every smile. Mrs. Parker asked to take the picture, her way of completing the circle of redemption. Later, at the celebration dinner, Emily announced her plans to open an art therapy center for traumatized children, while Grace shared news of her groundbreaking research into immunotherapy. Nathaniel, listening to his daughter's dreams, felt overwhelming gratitude for the family that had grown from tragedy. The evening ended with a surprise. Emily unveiled a small painting she'd created for Nathaniel. It showed the moment he first reached out to her on Brooklyn Bridge, but this version glowed with the knowledge of everything that would follow. Below, She'd written simply to the father who taught us that love is a choice we make every day. As the summer sunset painted New Haven sky in colors Emily would later capture on canvas, the extended Hayes family stood together, birth parents and chosen parents, sisters and grandmothers, all connected by choices made in love rather than obligation. Their story, beginning on a desperate night on Brooklyn Bridge, had become a testament to the healing power of unconditional love. Emily's graduation became not just a celebration of academic achievement, but a marker of their collective journey from brokenness to wholeness, from despair to hope, from strangers to family. In the end, they had all graduated from fear to trust, from pain to healing, from survival to living. If this story of family, healing, and unconditional love has touched your heart, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What moment resonated with you most? Have you experienced the transformative power of chosen family in your own life? Support our team by subscribing to the channel for more powerful stories that celebrate the human spirit. Every subscription helps us continue sharing tales that remind us of love's ability to overcome any obstacle. Don't forget to hit the like button and share this video with family and friends who might need a reminder that hope can be found in the darkest moments. Your engagement helps these stories reach those who need them most. Together, let's build a community that believes in the power of second chances and the strength of unconditional love.